Welcome back. I'm Sean.
I'm Brad.
This is my first watch.
This is my rewatch, The Wire, Season 2, Episode 8, Duck and Cover.
Duck and cover.
A lot of story happening, man. This was the episode that I felt like ramped up. Every storyline, every character, I feel like is doing their character to the highest degree.
Very
in
true.
This episode.
Yeah, everyone's at their peak themselves right now. And now all the pieces are just we're working towards the finale. We're working towards a conclusion. I can feel it. So
And things are feeling much more familiar, I feel like, in this episode, as far as recognizing what the target is, what the investigation is, how the characters are intermingling, how they're going to try and solve this thing, and how the criminals are going to try to escape.
yeah, and I think a lot of that, from a story standpoint, had to do with having a complete detail together. We got the whole family back together in this episode, as we'll get into.
With bonus players.
Yes.
So Duck and Cover, we start off with McNulty at the bar in our cold open. He is wasted. Looks like a nice little bar. They're playing jazz. And he goes to the payphone to call Elena. When we last saw Elena and McNulty, it was one little scene in the last episode where she pretty much hammered home that it's never going to happen between the two of them ever again. She can't trust McNulty. And McNulty is now calling. It goes to voicemail. I can only assume, like, back then it was like an actual ringing voicemail. Yeah,
or that. Yeah,
a real ringing answering machine though. And so he's calling in the middle of the night where his kids live, drunk, leaving messages for Elena to call him. He then goes back to the bar, and the bartender is asking, "Hey, you got a ride?" And he's like, "Oh, I got a cab. That's going to be picking me up. I'm not driving." And he's like looking you in the eye. So this guy's pouring him up drinks. And, you know, McNulty's a cop, and we know he's just going to go right into this drunk driving escapade.
Did you think to this? I thought immediately to when Rawls was trying to catch McNulty and get him fired, and he asked Santangelo, "He never drives drunk," stuff like that. I immediately thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, and we know from his outings with Bunk that that is what he does.
Right.
This is probably the most pronounced episode of it.
Yeah, and I think this is the drunkest visibly I've ever seen him on screen. Like, he was he was almost cartoonish how drunk he was. So
this is possibly my favorite scene in the entire show. I was freaking out. I was like geeking out when this was going on, and I'm like screaming into the Zoom, like, "This is my episode!" And I'm like taking pictures to send to my buddy, because this is how we remember Jimmy McNulty. Like, this is him at his peak. So he gets in the car, of course, and he's driving, and he comes across this bend in the road and crashes his car right into it. And instead of, I don't know, driving off, he gets out and looks at this turn and thinks, "I think I can make this." Backs up in his car and decides to try and make it again. You can see he is like passing out. He's blacking out in the car as he's trying to drive. And he tries to take this turn again and crashes even worse into the overhang. Now he's all bloody. He's smashed up his windows. His hand is bleeding. And, of course, he goes right to the diner for a little breakfast. And
you get some eggs, will you?
Yeah, he's passed out, and the waitress walks up and asks, "What can I get you? More coffee?" And he looks up at her, and he's attracted. So he decides he's going to stay for a little bit and asks for some eggs and scrapple. And I think it's the badge that the waitress sees. But she says, "You can get whatever you want." And we cut to McNulty in this girl's bed, and they're just having some more sex.
Yeah, McNulty's a mess, man. And I called him a bad father before, and very publicly. But, I mean, he's just a shitty dude. And then Bunk and Freeman kind of co-sign that sentiment later on.
When they're done with the sex, we could just cut right to McNulty waking up in her bed. He doesn't look like he knows where he is. His hand is bleeding all over the place. There's blood on the sheets. Like, it is gross. McNulty looks like he's dying.
And he is inside, right?
Yes. Go to our credits and come back to our quote. "How come they don't fly away?" This is from Ziggy. On the docks, Ziggy and Horseface and Ott are checking out Maui, and Ziggy's still steaming from the love child rib that he played on him last episode. Ott and Horseface are egging Ziggy on, like, "Oh, come on, you could take him. You could take Maui. He's not that tough. Just deck him." And the idea is that they're trying to get Ziggy to just cheap shot Maui one time. They know it's not going to work, but Ziggy's thinking about it.
And they've been in his ear since the bar too, telling him you could take him, you could take him. So I knew eventually Zig was gonna actually think he could take him.
Right. Last episode, they were trying to get him there, but that's when New Charles got his leg crushed before Ziggy could ever act on it. So we're
Yes.
picking right up from that exact moment. Daniels is filling the detail in on where they are after his meeting with Rawls, where he told Rawls that he's going to take the murders. And so they're on the hook for 14 murders. And Rhonda Perlman is with them and says, you guys sound a little desperate. And actually, Daniels feels pretty good about this because the team's done some great work. And so he allows the detail to fill Rhonda in on where they are with everyone. And basically they've got a pattern, they've got a connection, and they think they're going to be able to connect this to drugs because, as we found out last episode, prostitution is not enough to get a wiretap.
Right, but the drug connection could help him. And I love how Daniels kind of says, Lester, and he kind of lets him take the lead and start explaining everything to Rhonda. It really shows that how much trust Daniels has in Freeman, echoing what Bunk said a couple weeks ago.
Right. So Daniels and Kimo both are able to explain that they've got the Sobotkas and the port workers connected to the drug game. They've got White Mike calling the warehouse that they know belongs, that they followed the truck to, that they know belongs to whoever these guys are. They've got Prop Joe going into the warehouse, making connection with Sergey. They've got Sergey's cell phone. They've got Sergey picking up the trucks and calling the warehouse. So they're able to make all that connection as PC. And Nick Sobotka selling drugs is a known fact because of the illegal wiretap that Herc and Carver were able to put out there. That is cross-referencing with Sergey to put the Sobotkas with Prop Joe and the drug game.
Right. And just for anyone out there who may forget, PC's probable cause. I forget sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. Probable cause, and that is the first part of the affidavit for a wiretap. The second part is exhaustion. And they tell them that once they follow the truck, there's no way to get intel inside the actual warehouse.
Right. So that's their exhaustion right there.
So that feels pretty good to Rhonda. She tells him to start typing.
Now, just a side note a little bit. Whenever I see Rhonda, I automatically think of Jimmy. And whenever they're going to get back together, if they get back together. So, I mean, we know he's not a part of the detail now, but just seeing Rhonda as the attorney for this, just it puts the wheels in motion in my head that McNulty and Rhonda. So
yeah, we still need an answer on where that ended up from her jumping him in the parking lot after the Barksdale case.
Didn't they have one more scene in bed where he mentioned he was trying to get back with his wife, and then
you're right.
Right, that was their last encounter, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Ziggy checks out Maui again. They're on lunch break. Maui's getting a Frappuccino, and and Ziggy can't believe, like, look at this guy getting a Frappuccino, and the guy's like, oh yeah, his ass is candy, Zig. Just get him. You're a legend, Zig. Legend of the docks. Clearly, like,
so funny. Oh my god! Like, I just want to see Ziggy get beat up, and it was just so funny to me.
So Ziggy does it. He marches right over to Maui, throws his coffee down, real tough guy. Marches over to Maui and just takes some cheap shots, starts punching him in the body. It looks like Maui barely even knows that anything's going on, but he turns around to see Ziggy, decks him one time in the face, and just grips him up, takes the forklift to the top, and literally throws Ziggy onto the top of a can and takes the forklift back down. And the entire crew is cheering, hooting, hollering. This is the show they wanted to see. And Ziggy, I felt, looked like the Penguin.
In Gotham, on Gotham, yes. That I didn't know that while I was watching it, but now that you say that, very much so. The same vibes of that great actor who's also on Walking Dead.
Yeah, Oswald Cobblepot. And he's up there screaming, fuck you! You motherfuckers gave me bad advice!
Yes. This might be my favorite Ziggy scene of all, I think, so far at least.
That's awesome. Bunk shows up at the detail. This is the official welcoming Bunk to the detail. Now that Daniels has taken the open murders, Bunk no longer has a home at Homicide. He is officially detailed. He's wearing sweatpants, and the crew can't believe it. They say, I thought you were born in pinstripes. And he lets them know, he's not happy about having to be in this off-brand detail. And he says, I assume that when you're sent against your will to this place, you can wear whatever the fuck you want. And the crew is just
Yeah.
laughing. And this is just great bunk stuff. He's mumbling and grumbling, and oh, you can kiss my ass. And we get another lacrosse reference.
Yes, and then he compares himself to Jesse Owens, if
Jim
I'm not
Brown.
mistaken. Jim Brown, sorry.
Jim Brown.
Compares himself to Jim Brown, where Freeman calls him out immediately.
And I thought this was great. One, I think this is great. I thought this was just great black humor, for one. And two, I thought a great example of the bond built between Freeman and Bunk at this point. Now that we know Freeman, prior to this case, was working as partners with Bunk in place of McNulty, it really does seem, and we saw earlier when they were going back and forth with the port workers, but how quick Freeman picked up is like, you putting yourself beside Jim Brown? Just great humor that felt like just the two of them knew what was going on.
Right, but the whole room could laugh and appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Team Freeman with everything, man. He can do no wrong in my eyes right now. So I love the dialogue.
I mean, really, Daniels feels like he's taking all of his cues from Freeman. Freeman just has too much dirt on him to be able to be in charge.
Yeah, and he has a stink of wisdom on him, though.
Frank and Horseface are in the union office, just kind of scene setting here, that Frank is looking for his bills and that there's going to be another can coming in from the Greeks on Wednesday that Horseface is going to have to work. And I thought a little Tarantino in script writing here as Horseface goes into, how do you feel about fake tits? You like fake tits? I can't decide.
Now expand on that. What do you mean by Tarantino? Is that a Tarantino trope that I may not be aware of?
Tarantino always has these scenes in his movies that have nothing to do with the plot. It's just this, for instance, in Pulp Fiction, John Travolta and Sam Jackson go on for 10 minutes about feet.
Okay, so I don't want to get off into too much of a tangent about Pulp Fiction, but I think that scene was relevant because it was homie threw Marcellus Wallace threw a homie off the balcony because of the foot rubbing thing. But your point is still valid because when they're talking about the Big Mac or whatever, the Royale with cheese, that stuff really didn't have anything to do with anything. So
every Tarantino movie tends to have that nonsensical conversation that just goes on, and it's more character building. I felt like this was just here for Horseface.
Horseface character building, sure. Another example is Reservoir Dogs when they talk about tipping. That was great knowledge for me, but it had nothing to do with any of the story. So, yeah, I think the difference is here, Horseface, I mean, it's kind of a plot device because the bills for the cell phone were in the porno magazine. So it gives Horseface some character building, but we get a little story because the bills tie into the cell phone with Sobotka. So
yeah. Rhonda approves the affidavit, says that they can't spell for shit. The cops know it. They said, well, we'd be police if we could. And they have to get a duty judge to sign. And when asking, do you think he'll sign it? Rhonda seems to know this guy and says, oh, he'll sign it if you clean his windows or something like that, or wash his windows or clean out his garage. And Bunk's like, oh, no, they're serious. Yeah, this is what we're going to have to do. And we know that they're not kidding because we go right to the duty judge, and Rhonda and Freeman are there, and the judge has them swear to the affidavit, and coming up behind are Herc and Carver carrying this guy's big-ass air conditioner. And the judge tells them, take it upstairs, third floor, and then give the windows a little wash. And we got a nice little line going up the stairs from Carver saying, so glad I took my sergeant's test.
Line of the episode. I love that.
Frank calls the phone company to pay his bill. It's still in operation, but finds out that his account has been flagged. And he's calling more so to try and give them the story of, don't worry, I've got the money, it's coming. And they're just going, yeah, it's fine, but we're not going to cut it off. It's been flagged. And he can't put this together. Did you knew right away what was going on?
I kind of thought this was, there's a couple of steps in the episode, as we'll see, that are giving Frank clues that he's being watched by the police, right? So this was the first little breadcrumb they left, the phone bill having the flag on it.
And I think back to when Avon last season couldn't figure out what the detail was doing, and it was like his head was hurting. He was like, what the fuck is this? They had never seen an investigation like this. And I found similar to Frank going, what am I, special? Like, why is my phone being flagged? Don't they cut off your phone? Like he's trying to figure out exactly what's going on because he's never encountered this before.
Right. Very synonymous with Avon and his when they pulled out the cell phones, right? Cell phones, pay phones. When Stringer pull out all the payphones. It felt very much like that part of the investigation for the criminals. So,
Bodie,
my guy.
yeah, Bodie and Poot walking through, and I thought this was a nice episode for Bodie, kind of taking charge here, looking like the man. But they're walking through the old pit. We see the replacement couch. It's not the big red couch that we were used to. It's this black couch that we saw Poot eating KFC nuggets on at the end of last season. But Bodie says, tumbleweeds blowing through, and they're not selling anything. And Bodie says it's because their product is dog shit. They roll up on Puddin', who's sitting on the bench, and Puddin' has a great line. It's slow as a white man in slippers. They cut Puddin' loose for the day and sit on the bench. And just as they're sitting around, patrol cop comes by and tells them to keep on moving. And Bodie says, it's because we got no muscle down here. We have no power. The Barksdale crew really is starting to suffer here.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was referencing last week with Avon holding fast and trying to keep his territory and not realizing that he's losing it whether he wants to or not.
Yeah. And Bodie and Poot really are the only ones on the street that we're able to see the effects of that.
Yeah, which I love that they introduced that and showed us that the episode after we've seen the high level aspect of it with Avon and Stringer discussing what to do. So
Bunk and McNulty are having drinks at the train tracks, the same train tracks from episode 1. And Bunk is looking at the car. Says, God, you must had a night, even for a legendary motherfucker like yourself. And McNulty does not want to talk about it. He is pouting, and Bunk's trying to ask her, what the hell's going on with you? You sad because of Elena? Get your shit together. And he goes off to take a leak on the train tracks, and McNulty's asking about the case. No, now you're detailed. And he says they got every swinging dick with a shield on that detail except me. And you could tell almost what we're experiencing as viewers of, oh my God, all the main characters are there. Where's McNulty? He's saying the exact same thing. You've got all the big characters from season 1 together. How come I'm not getting to join the Avengers?
Yeah, him and Sidnor are like Ant-Man and Hawkeye.
Yes. And Bunk says, that's all you want. Why don't you just ask Rawls? Rawls will put you on the case. And they laugh about it. And I thought this was interesting, funny. I don't know. Bunk kind of comforts McNulty and slaps him in the face just as he just gets done peeing.
Okay, I'm not the only one that saw that, right? It was the same. Yeah, he didn't wipe his hands. He didn't wash. Obviously, he didn't wash his hands. They're out on the train tracks. And yeah. Okay, I noticed that too.
I just go like, oh, especially in today's time. I just go, oh God.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Sobotka is meeting with his brother Lou. This is Nick's dad, who we really only got to see one other time. They're having a beer together, and Frank is filling Lou in on the shenanigans with Valchek and stealing the surveillance van, just kind of keeping that joke alive. We got to see last episode when Carver was talking about how he has yet to see the surveillance van. So they're not letting that go. They're keeping the Valchek feud still alive here. But Frank is trying to get Lou into this position that he greased the board for, get him on the port advisory board. And it comes with a stipend, a few $100 extra. And Lou does not want any part of this. And he says, that's not for me. I just want to come home. I don't even want to go to meetings. And Frank says, you don't even have to go. Just show up once in a while. Let them know you're alive. And he says, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. And Frank really takes offense to this and starts insulting his brother as far as, your truck out there that's broken down, or your kitchen that needs to be redone. And Lou's proud of what he has and what he's built, the family life he's got. He says, what I've got, it's mine. And Frank says, oh, what are you, noble? And he says, not noble, right.
Do you think Frank just felt a little guilt for the dirt he's been forced to do? Because I will give Lou some credit. He said, I can imagine being in your position and having to make the choices, and I thank God that I don't have to. So I think Lou understands the tough spot that Frank is in, but he knows himself, and he knows he wouldn't even want to have to make those choices.
No, I thought it was much worse, to be honest. I thought I think the position is Frank needs Lou in that spot to vote on things for him, for the board, to vote on things. 2, I felt like Lou was telling Frank, when Frank's telling him, I felt like Frank was giving Lou excuses as to why he's doing dirt. And he was trying to wrap that into why Lou should do the dirt with him. And Lou's telling him, that's not my problem. That's your problem that you created. Don't make that my excuse. I don't have that problem. So I don't have to do dirt. I don't have to make that decision. And I think by saying I don't have to make that decision, he's telling Frank, you should be making the right decision. Almost saying like, that's not a decision to make. Because when you weigh it against what Lou is dealing with, right? Clearly Lou has no money. But he's not making that a reason to do illegal things.
Yeah, Frank had a line that stuck with me. He said, the only difference between me and you is, I was on Patapsco and you were on whatever it was. It was just, we were on different companies, right? And I just thought, I don't know, that stuck with me because I thought Frank was saying, I just happened to be on the one that survived and you didn't, So.
And Lou's response is, that's not the only difference between you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was the key. He's not letting Frank off the hook for doing dirt just because Frank takes this burden of keeping the union alive, right? Lou's union died, and he's surviving somehow. He's making it through. He's happy with the means. He's not making other people's problems of how are they going to live his issue to do illegal things, where Frank is making this all about him. And we see it with really our final scene with the Greek. The line when what the Greek is telling him as far as what to do with the money, it's completely foreign to Frank. And I think that's because this is all about the internalizing of the pressure of keeping the union alive for his family, for the legacy, whatever it is. Frank is obsessed with keeping the union alive no matter what.
Yeah, for sure.
Ziggy is looking at pigeons with an old man that used to know Ziggy's grandfather. They're talking about a little bit of backstory, a little bit of history of Ziggy's grandfather and racing pigeons. And Ziggy notices this white duck just kind of sitting there. The guy says, his wings are clipped. And this is where we get our quote from Ziggy, where he says, how come he don't fly away? And it's because his wings are clipped. And he wants the duck. And the guy tells him, he says, why don't you start with pigeons? You can train them. It's easier. And Ziggy says pigeons carry lice, and he wants the duck. Hands him a wad of cash.
Yeah, so is Ziggy going somewhere where I'm not following with this? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think when he said, the wings are clipped, he can't fly away, to me, I think that Ziggy related to that. I think deep down, that's how Ziggy feels. He can't fly away. His wings are clipped. Everything he tries to do, he's not good at it, kind of gets taken out from under him.
Okay.
That's it may be a reach, but that's kind of where I took it as, that he feels a personal connection to this duck.
Okay, I guess I didn't understand why he was going bird shopping to begin with.
Yeah, a lot of things with Ziggy's actions don't make any sense. Bunk and Freeman go to Daniels, and this is coming off of the conversation with McNulty that Bunk had, and Freeman is in on this, and Bunk says specifically, this is the great line of the episode, I thought. When he's not policing, McNulty is a picture postcard of a drunken, self-destructive fuck-up. When he's policing, he's pretty much the same motherfucker. But this is where Freeman, with the smell of wisdom, tells Daniels, go to Rawls. Go back to Rawls. And Daniels is kind of like, oh, boy, this is going to be tough because he knows Rawls hates McNulty.
Yeah, this is one of the last couple of times I feel like Freeman has been putting himself in positions weren't necessarily the best for everyone. Like, Daniels doesn't really have a lot of political capital after what happened with the Barksdale crew and with Burrell, right? So for him to go back to Rawls now and ask for McNulty, unless McNulty is really going to help this case tremendously, which they got a pretty competent squad already, I don't know that they needed McNulty. Yes, they did it as they owe McNulty, right? Bunk's a friend of him, and McNulty got Freeman out of the basement, out of the pawn shop, sure. But from a strategic standpoint for Daniels, I feel like they set him up for a little bit of a failure in terms of him having to go back to Rawls and ask for McNulty, ask for something from Rawls now that he doesn't necessarily need. There might be better asks he could have saved for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, with everything that they're, and to be honest, with what we learned, I think, from first season, I think it's fair to say that McNulty and Bunk are a fair swap for the detail. That having Bunk as good police is just as good as having McNulty. McNulty, I think, does enjoy the investigative work a little bit more than Bunk does.
Sure.
The undercover stuff, the patience.
Sure.
But yeah, it does feel like they're almost, and when Daniels goes to Rawls, it feels even like he's reaching a little bit with how bad he needs McNulty on this case. It does seem like they're going out of their way to stick their neck out for McNulty here.
Yeah, and I just don't know. I hope it doesn't hurt Daniels down the line, kind of is my thing.
Herc and Carver are meeting with Herc's cousin, Bernard, and this is who they're going to get to take the role of Duzzy Funlop, the illegal wiretap that was inside of a tennis ball. And
Fuzzy Dunlap.
Yeah, Fuzzy Dunlop. And this is the name they're going to put down as an informant that turned them on to Nick Sobotka being a drug dealer, because they cannot say that they actually recorded this information.
Right. It was an illegal wiretap, so they have to pretend like it's a confidential informant that gave them the information.
And Bernard, Herc's cousin, wants 10% of whatever they're going to get, and it's a funny back and forth. And eventually they have to agree, and Carver, it's their team name, again has a great line where he says, "Wonderful, now I'm in business with the whole family." Nick breaks Ziggy off for his cut of the package that they sold. And I thought this was a shift and change for Nick. Of now he's getting cocky. He sounds cocky to me.
Very confident, very overconfident, especially considering he just got wired the other day. Granted, it was illegal, but Herc and Carver, like, they broke the case through him.
Yeah. And he's telling, he bought the truck last time, and now he's saying money's cheap. He's telling Ziggy, I can't hand this shit off fast enough. The way he's just kind of like hanging in his truck. He's very relaxed. Very, very relaxed.
Overconfident.
And he gets a call that he can pick up more drugs, and he says, okay, I'll get back to you later. And that triggers Ziggy. It's like, is that the man? I want to meet him. And Ziggy wants to get back in on the drug game no matter what. He says he'll do it himself. And Nick just says, dude, chill out. We're making money. Let me handle this. And Ziggy's like, fuck that. Fuck the money. Tosses all the dollar bills out of the truck.
God, I hate Ziggy so much. That pissed me off, man.
The detail is up on the wiretaps now. The affidavit's gone through, and now they have got the phone in the warehouse bugged, and they're able to get the actual callback of Nick calling Sergey and the warehouse calling Sergey. They're not as careful as the Barksdale crew, and Freeman has to tell them, this ain't West Baltimore.
A great line.
A callback to what Herc was telling us when he first met up with Kima, saying, these white guys just talk about drugs.
Yeah, it's so interesting how, I love the consistency, right?
Mm-hmm. Daniels is meeting up with Rawls now, and this is going to be the official request. This is where we see, where I really feel like he's stretching how much he needs McNulty, but Daniels tells Rawls, I could really use him. And we're getting classic Rawls rebuffs. Quick, back to Daniels. I could use him. And Rawls' reply is, and I could use 3 more inches of meat. Daniels saying, have you ever seen how a dog gets when he smells a bone buried out in the yard? And Rawls replies back, yeah, and I've seen one take a shit on my carpet too. And Daniels then brings up the sold piece of dialogue that they had in the office when he says, I got your open murders. What I need from you, I get. No bullshit, no arguments. And Rawls agreed to that. But he says, listen, when I said that, I meant, you could feel my tits or have a kiss. Again, just more crude humor from Rawls. And he's adamant, you cannot have McNulty. And Daniels draws the line right then and there, man. I'm proud of Daniels for truly playing the game the right way when he says, you want me to clear those murders? This is it. This is him drawing the line. You want this case off your back? You want these open murders solved? And there's nothing Rawls can say because he can't have this case come back to homicide. So he sits down and very, very seriously, I think, he says, be sure that you do.
Yeah, and then I almost feel the opposite as you because of how that scene ended. It's like Daniels almost, it's one thing he can play himself off as magnanimous for taking those 14 murders. I did a favor for the homicide department, right? But now Rawls is kind of like, you better clear these murders or it's your ass, not mine now. You've already taken them. So I get what you mean by you're proud of him, but I'm worried for him because if you don't clear these things and McNulty doesn't help you clear it, what was all that for?
I guess I'm proud because I really like McNulty and I want McNulty back on the detail. And so I'm proud of Daniels for not allowing Rawls to tell him how to run his own detail.
Okay, gotcha. So, yeah, McNulty's a shitty dad, man. I can't stand this guy. But if you like McNulty, he's great police, so I get it.
Booty and Pooh. These team names here. Bodie and
Make
Poot.
vowels.
Bodie and Poot check out the new crew that is set up on the corner, and they're serving their former customers. Daniels calls McNulty to tell him that he's back with the detail, and he's happy. McNulty's so happy. Just as that's done, we see Daniels. I thought this was an awesome, last season when Daniels called Carver on being the mole, and he gives him this whole thing. At some point, you're gonna have to decide whether it's about you or the work. And he walks out, and he immediately goes to Prez Belusky to give him his badge and his gun, or give him his gun and tell him that the grand jury came back. And I felt like it was an on purpose, to compare those two, of his disappointment in Carver and almost how proud of the transformation that Prez has made during the first season. And so immediately after this feel-good moment of being able to tell McNulty that he's back in the fold and he can be police again, immediately after seeing that smile on his face and hanging up, Daniels is confronted by Carver, who is now pulling one over and lying to Daniels about this fuzzy Dunlop.
I didn't even draw those parallels, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And here Carver now, again, after no one thinks that they can trust McNulty, and Daniels is bringing Carver in because he feels like he can trust him. He can overtrust him because Carver's already burned him once. Here's Carver completely lying to Daniels and having Daniels sign off on this fuzzy Dunlop character and say that, oh, it's a street name, and they're giving him $150, but says he turned us on to the Sobotka kid. So now Daniels is wrapped up in this illegal wiretap.
Yeah, I think Hurt and Carver are just a bad pairing together. Like, they bring out the worst in each other.
Bunk and Kima discuss how the Johns are being brought into the brothel, and Rhonda tells them that if they can find a way into the brothel and connect that to the drugs, then they can use the wiretaps to help flesh out this case a little bit more. So that's going to be their new tactic, is figuring out how to actually get into the brothel. Bodie has to let his youngins go. There's no work. So these guys are like, how are you going to just let us go? And Bodie's like, hey, man, it is what it is. And they ask, what about some separation pay? And a great line again. This is, man, the writing in this is just so awesome. He says, you better go on before I lose my composure out this bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Just Bodie being alpha.
Yeah, and Bodie's always kind of wanted the spot he's in now, right? I don't think he ever, like we said, he never had respect for D'Angelo. Wallace was never really on his level in terms of being in the streets. And then, Poot, he calls him out later, as we'll see. Poot's very focused on getting pussy and getting women, and that's kind of Bodie doesn't like that. He thinks he's too focused on women. So
we did get the official goodbye from McNulty and his partner, Diggins, who tells him you're missing the best part of boat season, but he's headed to the detail, and they are now trying to figure out how to get inside of this brothel. And they decide they're going to use someone to actually contact the brothel. Herc volunteers right away, and Daniel says we need a much more subtle approach. Carver automatically volunteers, and Rhonda says he doesn't look like he'd have to pay. Little comment there from Rhonda, I thought.
You know what? I heard it and it went right over my head. I heard it and I registered it, but I didn't think anything of it. Okay.
And Kima and Bunk are not allowed. They say domestic issues, they would be in trouble. Of course, we know Cheryl would not be down with this.
No.
Like clockwork, here comes McNulty walking right in, and everyone just stops, and perfect. And Kima, there's so many great lines in this episode. Kima says, takes a whore to catch a whore.
Yeah, no, I take back. That was a line of the episode. that is a line of the episode.
And again, McNulty drops his catchphrase. The fuck did I do?
Yeah, it's a perfect introduction for McNulty back into the fold because, it's like they never skipped a beat. And now we have Bunk as an addition. So, and Beat.
Ziggy walks into the Union Bar with glasses and a walking stick as a blind man, and his new duck, leading the way with a diamond collar. What
the hell is Ziggy even doing? I'm not following any of this shit. I don't know what Ziggy's up to. Hopefully this means something more than a joke. I don't know.
The guy's just lost. I think that's all this means. The guy is lost.
Okay.
But what it did do is it made the union workers like Ziggy.
Yes, that's true.
Definitely
Ziggy's always a fan favorite, right? Even though he's an idiot, I think they all kind of have a soft spot him. They probably knew him since he was a baby, right? And Frank used to bring him around the docks, and they saw him grow up to be a little teenage 20-year-old fuck up, and they probably have a soft spot for him, I'm sure. So
Yeah. So they start buying drinks for the duck, and all the it's kind of like the mascot now. It feels like the duck is the mascot of the union.
okay, all right, I could buy that. That makes sense to me. Okay, now I could buy that.
McNulty and Kima are tracking the SUV out of the brothel to find out. They're assuming that this is one of the Johns, and so they're going to find out where he gets dropped off. The John gets dropped off at his car in a parking lot, and so McNulty's kind of commentating, letting Kima know what the guy's doing once he gets in the car. We get a little bit of insight into McNulty's past as a married man and an adulterer. When she says, what's he doing? Says he's got to get himself ready to tell some lies, and it's easy to lie to the wife. It's looking your kids in the eye that's the hard part, and you get a little bit of what maybe Elena went through with McNulty.
And it's a great shot where you just see them rack focus to Kima, kind of a little half judgmental, a little half sympathetic for McNulty's situation.
Yeah. So the plan is to jack up this guy, and it's just a normal everyday man, and they scare the shit out of him, put the flashlight on him, and just say, "You want to go home?" Again, this is a crime, prostitution. So they ask him, "You want to go home?" How does a guy get a date for the night? And so this guy, Robert Johnson, gives, and McNulty's great. I got to mention that it's been hours, and McNulty is right back into his policing, is in the streets thing, and Bob and just great dialogue. The guy gives McNulty this card with a phone number and a code to punch in, and says you ask for this name. This is how McNulty, as he says, my ticket to the dance.
Yeah, so great police work by McNulty and Kima.
The detail has Horseface working another can. Of course, we found out from earlier that this was a Wednesday, that the can was coming in from the Greeks, and so they get the word on that in the system. And Prez is very excited to combine what they've already learned with now having the wire up and running.
Yeah, you can tell Prez just gets, he really gets excited by the procedural things. He's like, I wish we had a wiretap on his phone, things like that really get him excited.
And he's kind of telling Bodie like how it's going to go, filling her in. Like, now that we have the wiretap, you're going to see how well this works out. Almost a callback to how awesome everyone thought the Barksdale case was in season 1.
Right. Now, do we think that Prez is being a little, kind of like Nick, a little overconfident? Like, yeah, it may not be as smooth as it was with the Barksdale tap.
I think he's just being nerdy. I think we're seeing how, we mentioned that this was our first time seeing Prez back out on the streets doing real police work. I think we're seeing how much he really does love the in-office investigative work.
Okay.
They have a line on the computer. They're able to identify the can that goes missing. Freeman automatically puts everyone into motion, like we saw in the last episode. Kima has eyes on the can and Sergey. Sergey's making the call that the truck's coming in, and they're able to see this on Sergey's phone. Frank walks out of the union office as the truck is leaving, and he kind of looks around, smoking a cigarette, and he sees Kima looking around.
I thought the way they shot that was perfect because it was subtle. It wasn't he sees Kima, he sees his face, dun dun dun. It was almost like a half shot where because they've established Kima was over there in the previous couple of shots. Then you see Frank do the pan, you see Kima in his peripherals, but it's nothing over the top. And I thought it was perfect. It gives you the idea that Frank's wheels are turning. He knows something's up, even if he doesn't know exactly what it is.
So this has Frank walk, and again, it's not obvious. It's almost like the wheels might be turning, but he might also just be kind of like shooting the shit. But he walks over to the cops that are on the docks now that have replaced Bodie, and there's a can that has a busted tab on it, a security tab that's been busted. So he's joking with them, much like he did Bodie. And I don't know if he planned on asking this when he walks over, but he plays it perfect because he starts walking off, tosses a cigarette, and then comes back and, oh, hey, by the way, when is B. Russell coming back from the Fairfield Piers? And this is when these cops let it all go and say, oh, she's not a Fairfield. She's working with the city police on some detail. And you can see it in Frank's face now. That's like, oh, that's two weird things happening now.
Exactly. So now the pieces are coming together, right? You got the phone thing, weird. You got this random person on our site who I've never seen before, weird. And now, why would BD lie to me? So yes, there's just all these anomalies that are making his radar go off.
So he goes back and he's running this by Horseface, and Horseface thinks Frank is paranoid. But remember what they said last season when Avon was paranoid. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean someone's not out to get you.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to figure it all out, and Frank decides to try an experiment. What he wants to do is to swap the cans. And he says, you know what? The next can that's already ready to go, they've got 2 that are ready to go, but Frank tells Horseface, stack that can normal. Lose the very next can, which they'll know is clean. Just lose that can and give that to the Greek. And Horseface trying to figure this out. He's like, really? And Frank says, it's okay. If we lose this can and I'm right about what I think, they're going to thank me. And if not, we'll switch everything back tomorrow and explain it. It'll be no problem. So this is what Horseface does. He loses the clean can, and like clockwork, they jump right on it. The detail needs to get a tail on it. Kima is already out tailing the first can that went out there with Sergey, but now they're going to need someone to tail the second can, and so McNulty volunteers to go run out there. They don't think he's going to make it in time, and so Bodie has the idea to get the Port Authority to hold up the truck so that McNulty can get there in time. Frank is waiting to see what happens, and as soon as this truck gets picked up, now Sergey's not in on this, so he doesn't know what he's pulling.
Right.
But the Port Authority stops the truck right outside the checkpoint and says, I think this is where we really get to see the humor in the Sergey character. But he says, I clocked you doing a 24 and a 20. And Sergey says, you stopped me for 24.
Yeah, so, I mean, is this a mistake on the – I mean, I know they had to, right, because McNulty needed time to get in position to tail the truck. So this was Bodie calling an audible on the fly. Let's get them to stop the truck. But it gave Frank all the information he needed to know that they're watching what they're doing, right? So, I mean, a miscalculation maybe more than a mistake, perhaps?
Very much. A little too heavy-handed in this case.
Yeah.
What it does do, though, is get a little eye contact between Bodie and McNulty, because when Bodie does suggest this, McNulty says, oh, good call. And she kind of looks at him for a minute. And you could tell, like, I think she's looking for acceptance with these really smart investigators to feel like she can kind of add something to the team.
Yeah, and this is not her first time, seeing McNulty in all his good police glory, right? When the girls first came off the boat and the one that they fished out of the water, like, she was involved with them and she's heard his name thrown around. So he's kind of got a little reputation from her perspective, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Frank sees the cop pull over the truck and he immediately turns off his cell phone right away.
And you could tell he was about to call the Greek or Nick or whoever, and then realizes, hey, this thing's probably tapped.
Mm-hmm. So Frank calls Spiros from the union office phone that the can coming to you is wrong, and I knew it was wrong. And Spiros is on to it right away. He says, not on the phone. And he says, okay, but this time he needs to be there to hear this shit. And he wants to hear this shit. He's basically, Frank is demanding that the Greek come to the next meeting so that he can tell him how worried he is.
Yeah, definitely. And he has a good point to be.
This sets off a chain. Once this truck comes in, Triple G is at his electronic shop, and as soon as this truck comes in, this sets off the phone calls, which is going to open the door for the detail now, because Triple G and Spiros are going to open up the truck to see there's nothing in there but like some plastic parts and some knockoff Barbie dolls. And Triple G was expecting vodka. They naturally, because they don't know what's going on, they assume the Sobotka is screwed up. So they immediately call Spiros, calls from Sergey's phone, which we know already is tapped. They call Spiros and tell him, and Spiros tells him it's no problem. I expected this. Drop the truck in the street somewhere. Just get rid of it.
So we see the detail following along the call patterns, very much like they did after Brandon's death that one night with Omar and D'Angelo. With Avon and D'Angelo and Stringer. So it's very synonymous with that. But also, Frank accomplished exactly what he was trying to. He prevented them from, catching that dirty can. So,
and really though, what he didn't even, they already got the one dirty can though, because they already tracked the one. Really, all he did was blow up. He unknowingly blew up the police's operation, and the police don't know it yet.
Yes.
But what they did do was put Freeman onto Spiros' number. So as they have it, they're on to the big boss.
Right. So, we're going to talk about this at the end of who won this week, but it's good calculation by Frank. And like I said, I always like Frank. Yeah, but it's even, very even there, because they both kind of made miscalculations, but for good reasons. So
it's like that scene. It's almost like that scene when the good guy and the bad guy are having a hand-to-hand fight, and then they get separation, and they both almost like in Face Off with John Travolta and Nick Cage, and they're
Mexican
both behind a
standoff.
wall, and they've got a gun, and they're both like, all right. They've both taken some L's, but they're both ready to get that leg up, and the adversaries are about to make their move, and you just don't know who's going to get it in first.
Very nice using a face-off reference now that we know Frank's Dubov, right? So
Bodie wants his crew. He's trying to round up the troops, and he wants his crew to set up at 7 a.m. at this corner so that they can take their real estate back. And the guys are all like, 7 a.m., but Bodie lets them know, like, bring bats, bring your boys. We're in here to get busy. And so now the guys are all down for this, and this is where some girls distract Poot, and Bodie has to pull him to the side, man. It's like, yo, like, I get mine too, but I don't make it my everything. You're gonna get dizzy behind this shit.
So did you pop the way I did when they were like, hey, Poot? Like, I thought that was just, I don't know. Poot's clearly the ladies' man, and Bodie's not a fan of him being distracted when they're talking business.
But I love that they're giving him some character development. They're because he's clearly a number two. Poot is definitely the number two of the Bodie crew, the Bodie team. But they're not making him a silent character. He's got definite personality that if the time were to come for Poot to have to step up and be a number one, we're not starting at ground zero with who is Poot.
Yeah, and it's been subtle, right? Because he was just the fourth guy on the couch for a long time who was always asking questions about why didn't you fuck her? But, from that little bit of a character, they're developing him more, as you said. So
McNulty is still trailing the second can as Sergey drops it off, and he checks in to see what do you want me to do here. And Daniel says, we know the can's clean. Just come on home. Back at the Union Bar, the Duck is still drinking. Frank tells Nick about what's been going on. And Nick isn't sure if this is real or not. He says, he might be adding up 2 + 2 and getting 6. But Spiros will know what to do. And I thought this was very similar to, the trust that we saw with that D'Angelo, that Wallace had in D'Angelo, or that Bodie has in Stringer. Almost like it felt like Spiros is taking on a father figure role to Nick.
Yeah, for sure.
But they're going to go meet him tomorrow, and Frank wants Nick with him when they go to see the Greek.
Yeah, do we ever really understand how Nick got that job of getting the can numbers? Is that just kind of like understood?
I think that Frank just wanted some distance.
Okay.
And so Nick is, I think, you need people that you can trust. And so Nick is the guy to relay the messages. Horseface is the guy. Horseface and Johnny are the guys on each end of checking and the computer to do the dirt. Okay. And Frank is the mastermind.
Makes sense.
Frank does ask about the Duck before he leaves, and Nick tells him that it's Ziggy's. And I find it interesting that there's nothing alarming in this, because as his father, I would be worried at this point when you're going like, what's going on? And clearly Ziggy's just like, it doesn't make sense because Ziggy's just nuts. And the fact that his father's not acting on this, for me, is alarming.
Yeah, maybe he's just too distracted by all the other stuff on his plate, where this Duck is so low priority.
McNulty comes back and gets a scoop on the clean can from Freeman and Beatty, but they don't know. Freeman's so happy about this. He has no idea that they tipped their hand. He thinks someone messed up. Right,
and he says that. He's like, someone messed up, and they're all kind of like giggly about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they're the ones who messed up, technically.
Exactly. And McNulty's going to call quits for the day, ask if everyone wants to get a drink. And much like we talked about Prez, I think, they were showing how much Prez enjoyed the office work. That's what Freeman's doing. He's going to stay in the office for the night and work on the paper trail.
Yeah, Frez. I'm doing it now. Freeman and Prez are definitely cut from the same cloth in terms of the paper trail and having just an affinity for that kind of police work.
Mm-hmm. But Beatty is down to go get one drink because after one, she gets sleepy, much like McNulty.
Yeah, I mean, I love this little mini story between McNulty and Beatty that's playing out here.
And boy, Freeman sees it right away. He is grinning ear to ear when he's looking at McNulty and passing off this line of, oh yeah, sure, just one drink.
Yeah, I think he sees a little bit of himself and Chardine in the situation too. Maybe with less good intentions, but yes.
So we're at the same bar now, McNulty and Beatty, the same bar that McNulty started the episode with, drunk, calling his ex-wife. He's back there, and we're getting the story of more story, I guess, of Beatty's ex-husband. We knew that her ex-husband left and she had to take this job, but now we find out that he left because basically she wasn't fulfilling his role or his dreams of a housewife, wanted his meals cooked and all that. And so he took off and left her and her 2 kids, boy and a girl. And McNulty lets her know that he's also got kids and divorce on the way. And as this is going on, the bartender comes to set McNulty up with his shot of whiskey that he always does. And he's got to call the bartender out, says, "Oh, not tonight, Gus. I'm good." And the bartender says, "Oh, whatever you say, Jimmy." And he's got to kind of play it off. And I just wonder what's going through Beatty's mind as this happens.
I mean, you could tell she kind of laughs at it like, "Oh, are you trying to do this to impress me, maybe?"
Before they leave, he says, "I'm ready to go." But before they go, he makes a phone call to the brothel with the number that he got from Bob Johnson and tries to see how this will go, setting up a date.
Do you think there's some poetic writing to, this episode started with him calling his wife from that same payphone, and now he's calling a whore. Granted, it's for police work, but I don't know. There's something about that. It's like the same phone you're begging your wife to take you back. Now you're calling this escort service. So
yeah, I thought there were 2 parts: the dichotomy of him calling his ex-wife wasted and now calling a whorehouse at the exact same bar, same cell phone. But the other thing is that he's got it together. He's not drunk, and he's calling this whorehouse as police, and he's sober as police. Like he said, if I'm not good for police work, I don't know what good I am. And here we're seeing now he's got some worth. We go to see Bodie, who is hanging around the corner, checking out this crew that took the real estate, see how they're working the drugs. And I thought it was very Omar-like.
In what way?
I looked at it as he's setting up, trying to see what they're about, see what they have going on. And I thought that that's like something Omar would do: sit in the shadows, smoking a cigarette, watching the Barksdale crew for who knows how long. Bodie was just kind of there. It's either that or he's sad. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's smart too, because I mean, it's just the whole idea of getting up at 7 a.m. to beat them to their spot, right? I thought that was just a smart tactic. So, and I know Omar, I mean, we see him in broad daylight with a shotgun a lot, so we know he's an early riser too.
Mm-hmm. McNulty stops into Beatty's place for a quick beer after dropping her off, and she's got to go put the kids to bed. And this is when McNulty kind of snoops around the house a little bit, just looking what's on the table, what's on the refrigerator, a cute little policeman cookie jar. But I think what McNulty starts taking in is that Beatty is a good woman. She's a mom. She's family first. She has a lot of shit going on, a lot of responsibility. And you can almost see the disappointment in McNulty's face of, "Oh, man, I can't fuck this girl."
Is it that? Because I took it as more as, not that I can't, that I felt like he felt like she was a better parent than him, and maybe that's just me being biased, and I judge McNulty as a shitty dad, and that's kind of the lens I look at him through. So he sees this mom who's a cop just like her, a cop just like him, excuse me, and her marriage broke up because of the job, just like him, among other reasons, but she's still able to maintain the relationship with her 2 kids. He has 2 kids. So I don't know. That's how I read it. I read it as he felt like a piece of shit that didn't deserve to fuck her. You know what I mean?
That's a good point of view on it. I think I lost the thought of him being a father, or just the parallels between their lives. And I took it as he was on the hunt to have sex with Beatty one night, like he always does. And he's thinking like, going back to what Bunk told McNulty in the first season, "You're no good for people. Everything you touch." And I took it as maybe like he's thinking like, "I will fuck this woman's life up if I start getting involved with her. She doesn't deserve this."
Yep. Yeah, I think that's right too. Now, if he was drunker, he might have done it, I think, too.
Yeah. So he puts the beer down almost immediately. Like he's not into going forward with this. And I didn't think in a disgusted way, just in a he wants to be respectful for the first time in his life. And so he almost looks like he's going to leave without saying goodbye. But Bodie comes back and catches him putting his coat on. You can almost see it in her face. She's a little like, oh, you're leaving? But they seem comfortable, and they definitely seem like they like each other. You know, he says like, oh, long day. And she smiles and she's like, yeah, me too. Like, she seems to have really enjoyed his company, at least for the night.
Yeah, and I think she, without saying it, she understood why he was leaving. She understood the reason.
It's too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Bodie and Poot are set up on their corner. We see Poot doing handoffs. The rival crew rolls up, and just great shit talking between them. And Bodie says, "Yeah, we took your corner while you were resting." And Poot shows his gun, and the leader tells Bodie, you can roll out now, or we're gonna have to do it the other way. And Bodie's like, "Oh, we got to do it the other way." And the guy tells Bodie, he says, "You're gonna see me in your sleep." And Bodie's just playing it off so cool, like, I know. And Poot's cool, and Poot's saying, like, they gotta come back.
And I think Bodie said, I think what he actually said was, who do you got to do it the other way? Because at that point in time, because of Bodie's strategic planning, they were outnumbered, right? They had the bats and Poot with the gun. So it was a losing situation for them there, but he knows tomorrow it's going to pop off. So.
Oh yeah. He says the way we just punked them, they got to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. I thought it was the first time that, now if you remember, Poot was the one that puked when Omar stuck them up. I thought this was...
Oh, that was Poot. Yeah.
I like that Poot was standing tall as a soldier with Bodie. He was the one to pull the gun out. Like, he had a little bit of a cocky smile. Like, what we doing, boys? Like, I like that from Poot.
Now, I think that had a lot to do with the previous scene with Bodie calling him out on how focused he was on the business. And I think that kind of, whether it was subtly or not by the writers, it reinforced the fact that now Poot has to prove himself a little bit to Bodie.
Frank and Nick go to the Greek, the diner, and they demand, he's not showing himself. The old man is not showing himself. And it's just Spiros, and he's telling, oh, I will tell him what you say, and they're going to walk out. And the old man finally reveals himself, and it's almost like this is the guy, he's here all the time. It's funny because I forget, I remember this part of it, and I kind of forget every time I start watching that we see the Greek the entire time. We see this old man be the boss, but it never happens in front of Nick or Frank, or especially Ziggy. Yeah. So for them, it's a shock that this old man that's been sitting at the counter drinking coffee the entire time is the guy actually in charge.
Very true.
So they sit down, and Frank explains the phone. He explains Bodie, and he explains why he swapped the cans. And Spiro says that as soon as he got word, he shut down the warehouse. And the Greek says, that's fine, but now we need to reopen everything. He's one step ahead of the cops. He doesn't want the cops to know that they're on to them. And so we need to open up the warehouse. We need to keep losing cans that get delivered to the warehouse so that they think there's nothing going on, which is very, very smart. But to Nick's point, he goes, but we're still going to get paid, right? Even though we're not delivering you illegal stuff. And Spiros is like, hey, if you're not getting anything, if we're not getting anything, you can't get anything. And that's unacceptable for Frank, because Frank, as we know, is already, he needs money to keep things going politically for the union. And he says, I've got legislative things happening right now for my union, not a month from now. He can't risk not getting paid. And the Greek thinks about this, again, very strategic, very calm, which is scary. And he says, okay, we're going to keep paying you because I'm thinking about the business that we're going to keep doing down the road. And in my head, he's almost saying, like, I'm going to own you at this point if I'm going to keep paying you.
Yeah, so I agree with you 100%. It was a very scary scene because the Greek has this brooding, like, quiet nature to him where, he's powerful and he doesn't have to flex his muscles to show it. So Frank was very hot and angry in this situation and slamming on the table, pointing his fingers. And the whole time I'm just like, careful who you're talking to.
Once they agree on the money, this is where the Greek says to him, and I think goes back to, kind of like what Lou, Frank's brother, was talking about a little bit. But, the Greek says that you need to spend some of this money. You should go out, spend that money, something you can touch. And Frank's looking at him like he doesn't even understand what he's saying, like he is speaking Greek to him. And I think, you can see it in his face. To me, Frank looks like he is at a max level of stress, like heart attack.
Yes.
level of stress. And he almost wants to say to the Greek, this isn't for me. None of this is for me. I'm not doing I'm getting zero out of this. This is just for the union.
And it's almost a continuation, at least from a mental standpoint, of the conversation with Lou, right? I feel like all that stress from all the previous conversations in that argument are still weighing on him.
Mm-hmm. And so he just walks out. And the Greek didn't look happy. We just kind of end on the Greek staring out into space, off into the distance. And that's where it fades on. And coming off the conversation, it definitely felt like it's making the Greek's mind wonder about Frank.
Sure.
And that's how we end it.
Yeah. Was this episode quicker than normal? It just flew by. Maybe just because so much was happening, but it just really flew by for me.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like every time it ends, because you've mentioned this, because of the way it ends, I always feel like I'm going up. Oh, you can't see it. I always feel like I'm going up like this. You know, it's all like this, but I always feel like whenever it always ends on a scene where I'm like this, and then you hear the music kick in, and you're just like, oh.
Yes. That's every episode, and then that's their aesthetic, and that's brilliant the way they do it. It's almost as if you're waiting for the next scene, and then the music hits, and you're like, wait, not already, is it? So
yeah,
I don't know. For whatever reason, maybe the story's just picking up, or whatever the case. But even us recapping it now, it just felt shorter than normal. So.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it always feels like they do a 1.5 episodes. And like we talked about, with the Game of Thrones style and the way that episode 12 went into episode 13, we got all the things happening. And then episode 13 was like finding out where everyone's going to end up for season 2. And it always feels like they're giving you an episode and all the cool stuff is happening. But then they're also going to give you a little bit more episode that probably should start the next episode. And then they just cut it.
Yes, that's a perfect way to describe it. Yeah, they give you a full episode, the first 3 scenes of the next one, and then they bring in the end credit music. And then you're like, okay. I mean, I like it, though. I'm not going to lie, man. Because I never know when it's going to end. Any other show, you can feel the ending of it coming. You're like, okay, this scene's wrapping up. This story, this show, you never know when it's going to end unless you're watching the clock. So.
All right. Do we want to talk about our cruise here and see who we got?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one for me because, like I said, the police, they made some headway. They got McNulty on the team. The detail's stronger than ever, and they're all working collectively very well. There is the little hiccup of the illegal wiretap that may come back into play, may hurt the investigation. And then we know, and then this goes to the Sobotka and the docs, they are aware that they're being watched, whether they have confirmation or not. Frank feels it, and they've gone to the Greeks and they've discussed it. So they're going to move a little differently and try to throw the police off the trail. So it's really hard right there. I feel like they're almost dead even between those two.
Well, I think because the Ports and Sobotkas haven't figured it out. They still don't know what's going on exactly. And we still have that, what we talked about with last episode, and that separation of Nick and Frank is still going on without Frank knowing. He's almost going into these negotiations somewhat blind as to what the real relationship is.
Very true. Very true.
So I feel like in that way, I almost want to put the police a little bit ahead of them, especially because now they've got Bunk official and they've got McNulty back on the team and they've got a plan.
Okay, that's fair. I can totally see that. So yeah, the law enforcement won this week with the Sobotka crew and the docs guys kind of trailing right behind. And I think the biggest L, even though Bodie tried to reestablish some dominance, but their weight still sucks. They're losing territory. We didn't hear from Stringer and Avon this week, but nothing's changed on that side of things. So I think they're definitely lost this week if we can put anyone on the bottom. So
yeah, I think especially I think this episode specifically showed how quickly, even though we don't really get to see, we know that these other guys are kind of like independent drug dealers and not with like Prop Joe or any other names that we've really heard. But we're seeing how much the Barksdale crew doesn't exist. There was no let me go to Shamrock from Bodie. No, let me get to Stringer on this. They're handling this completely on their own. They don't have, and in fact, Bodie's saying, these cops wouldn't come up here if we had some muscle out here. Like, they've got nothing. They've got no semblance of an organization going on. So I think,
none of that.
More so than off the mat, man, they're not even in the game at this point.
Yeah, if Weebay was there, they may have been able to intimidate a little bit, but Weebay's also locked up along with Avon.
Right. So yeah, I think we're gonna need something big from Boot and Bodie.
We're gonna have so many iterations of between what's Kima and Prez? What's their name?
Prima.
Prima. Between Prima and Bodie.
Yeah, I think we need to see something from those guys to solidify that they've got that corner and that they're going to have product to support it.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see. I'm still most intrigued, even though we got the least screen time about it. I'm just very intrigued where the Barksdale crew goes from here. And it's almost like on the peripherals of everything because what they're doing has nothing to do with the investigation or the docs. So that's why I'm so interested. Maybe
Our next episode will be season 2, episode 9, Stray Rounds.
Stray Rounds. Wow, we're getting really close to the finale. 13 episodes, correct?
I think so. Yeah, we're getting there.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. This was my first watch.
This is my rewatch, The Wire. See you next time.